Death has made itself the identity of Jujutsu Kaisen. The way death is dealt to characters, the way characters deal with death, and the way Gege toes the line between expectations and reality, both for the readers and the characters, are all some of my favourite aspects of the story. Gege is a very unpredictable writer. Think long and hard about where you invest your stocks, because Agenda Kaisen is a very scary place when the mangaka himself has the most powerful agenda of them all. Anybody can get it. The fact Nanami is his stated favourite character should tell you Gege is not letting anything sway him from telling the story he wants to tell. Gojo, packed. Nobara, does it even matter at this point if she's dead or alive? What about somebody like Tsumiki, who serves as the basis for everything about Megumi, the best pick for deuteragonist of the story? I want you to think about how her exit from the story was treated, as Megumi was forced to kill the possessed body of his sister. Tsumiki is a character who was physically robbed of the chance to be an individual in the story, only ever existing as a canvas, a flashback character subject to Megumi's bias as the point of view, and the victim of this random crazy woman from centuries in the past who has a pretty concerning obsession with the story's top villain. Principal Yaga died in a back road with nobody asking any questions. Kashimo, bro, may just be the best source of comedy in the series. Yuki, well, she literally deep fried herself to try and kill Kenjaku but failed. Oh, and speaking of Kenjaku, he outsmarted a black hole only to end up seemingly getting cooked by a tag team of silly, goofy comedy guy and Yuta. It's tough being a fan of JJK, especially the characters in JJK, when the author himself don't really f**k with anybody like that. Gege has no qualms over who lives or dies as long as it's in service of the story he wishes to tell, and the way death has been used over the course of JJK's roughly 250 chapters at the time of me making this video has been absolutely incessant. It's not just seeped into so much of the world building and lore, but we see death again and again. Death is constant, death is everywhere, and nobody is safe, which was always destined to be a point of extreme controversy given the intended audience of battle shonen manga readers. I'm a pretty fair guy. At least I like to think so, and for that reason I'm going to ignore what I think I know about storytelling, battle manga, and how death should be used as a narrative tool, and instead try to see Jujutsu Kaisen for what it is, for what it's trying to be. This isn't a critical analysis or me passing judgment on the writing in any way, rather I'll be voicing my interpretations on what Gege intends with his writing. There's obviously no objective way of determining an author's intent besides just asking them, but unfortunately we have a limited amount of Gege interviews, especially ones about his own personal views on the story. But there is one specific comment from Gege that I haven't been able to forget since I first read it. It's short, but it speaks volumes. On the first page of volume 1, forgive me for the pun, is a note from the mangaka himself. The other day, I saw a video of myself laughing hysterically. I was a little taken aback by how demonic I looked. I hope you enjoy that type of person's first graphic novel. This gave me a very particular impression about the story I was reading and the person who was writing it. And the more I thought about this and the more the story continued to progress, the more this impression became an interpretation and eventually an understanding of what this story hopes to achieve. Today, we'll be talking about death and Jujutsu Kaisen. Be sure to stick around until the end if you want to hear my thoughts specifically on Kenjaku. There have been roughly 50 named character deaths in Jujutsu Kaisen thus far. That isn't a particularly high number for 250 chapters, but you do have to consider the size of the cast, which is fairly small given the scale of the story. There are of course a decent number of minor and even background characters that do little more than make the world feel whole, who definitely add to that death count, but when it comes to major characters, the way the story's cast is laid out is noteworthy. There are several primary characters with no one real dominant POV besides arguably Yuji, who has undergone a chaotic journey, especially since the beginning of the Culling Games. The arc has been structured in parts with the different colonies, and screen time is shared across the cast pretty fairly. Despite being the main character, Yuji spends significant time away from the spotlight, even if he does have the most time on screen overall. Everybody has their role, even the villains. The antagonists are people we spend a lot more time with than is expected from this kind of manga. They aren't so shrouded in mystery, with some slight exceptions, and I at least never really feel like the story is being guided in a specific direction or another. It's a completely fair ground, in a very raw and honest fashion. We get a window into this world and it all feels painful painfully real. We see people for who they present themselves to be, and if we're lucky, we get to peer into their minds and learn some more. But it never really feels like there's this strong, cohesive, deliberate narrative unfolding, and I don't mean to say this as a negative. Jujutsu Kaisen has this really uncanny balance of very high intensity storytelling with sky-high stakes that is undercut by this grating sense of mundanity. I've never quite struggled to tell where a story's going like I do with Jujutsu Kaisen, and getting attached to characters on a week-to-week basis is more difficult than it usually is. I think there's a lot of reasons for this, but the way the cast is laid out, the general framework of the story, is by far the main reason. Gojo, for example, I've liked forever, but it wasn't until his infamous death that I truly came to love the character, because that gave me a sense of finality. There was no more questioning where things would go, no more expectations, and I could, at last, look at him for what he is and not what he could eventually be, because he was dead. And it was over. I could look at his character holistically and take everything around him into consideration. Typically in a story, there are several precedents set for things to happen in certain ways. Threads are woven, seeds are planted, and you have a rough image of where things are headed. This is obviously the case for Jujutsu Kaisen, but Gege also sets a second precedent. Don't get your hopes up. Some things, like Sukuna's binding vow, an entire scheme to possess Megumi's body, was clearly in motion, and funnily enough, I think Sukuna is the only character this really applies to. When he tries to do something, he makes it happen. The reason this is noteworthy is because these expectations are planted by Gege not just as a means of guiding the audience's attention, but informing us of the characters involved. Narrative payoffs are almost like measuring sticks of who can make it happen and who can't. An example of this would be the heavily implied eventual conversation we'd get between Megumi and Gojo. There were numerous opportunities, plenty of time spent together where Gojo could have told him the truth about his father, but Gojo never found the chance to, or never took the chance to. And instead of this paying off in a heartfelt interaction between student and mentor, it's a throwaway line amidst several different revelations we receive in Satoru Gojo's final chapter. That isn't to say this plot thread is completely resolved, since Shoko knows and is supposed to tell him, but Megumi is currently wallowing in despair because Sukuna cracked him like an egg. My point is exactly that things don't always go as you'd expect them to. It was planted because Gojo clearly expected to eventually have told Megumi, and here it's a painful regret among the several other regrets Gojo faces in this conversation with the people he'll be joining. Conversing with his dead friends literally or as figments of his imagination, we cannot tell. Toji's presence is the icing on the cake for me because either option is absolutely hilarious. Either he's in the purgatory airport for some reason, or he traumatized this guy Gojo so hard he had to make an appearance at his final happiest moment. That's the beauty of it though, I think. The lines are blurred between warm delusions and harsh reality, not just for the reader, but the characters also. The world of Jujutsu Kaisen is only fair in that it is utterly unfair. It is a world where the powerful dictate how things go. A common opinion regarding the treatment of character deaths in this story is that Gege is too trigger happy, that these deaths are only for shock value and directly intended to get some kind of reaction from the audience. I can understand where this comes from, since there have been several moments in the story where a character was killed that I absolutely did not see coming. A character who I expected to have a larger role to play, to have a longer story that needs telling, but their story is cut short again and again. Why is that? What is Gege hoping to achieve? The title of this video is very specific. I chose the word problem because it is a problem, both within the story and from the perspective of critics. There are various things that spark controversy in the JJK fandom, but this topic is by far the single most discussed. And I honestly think that's a good thing because at the end of the day, death is the central most important theme of the story. So for it to be discussed tells me Gege is at least doing something right. I'd argue that the defining quality of Jujutsu Kaisen is that it is a tragedy, a story where the characters are subject to excruciating circumstances that force them to kneel, to have things not go their way. Some can continue marching on in the face of despair whilst others fall behind and succumb to the torture. The story literally begins with the most common kind of tragedy, the death of Yuji's grandfather, presumably by old age, a feeble old man with no loved ones besides his unusually kind grandson, going to sleep for the final time in a hospital room that that is agonizingly empty. It's so dull and normal by design, and that's very effective. That sight is why Yuji's entire goal is to die surrounded by people, to die a proper death. Then he is thrust between a rock and a hard place, forced to either accept death now or live a life that's arguably worse than dying. To be a sorcerer is to be in the face of death, in one way or another. Yuji is told right from the outset of his journey that Jujutsu sorcerers are always close to death. It's pretty much in the contract. To be a sorcerer means to expose oneself to the many forms of death, whether it be the curses that feed off human negativity or lives lost in the pursuit of a goal. That's the life Yuji signed up for. It's not a coincidence Gege had him literally die in the first arc of the manga. The protagonist is typically the main window into the world the story takes place in, and so their character is usually directly tied to the most important ideas the story will cover. So Yuji, even in isolation, gives us a pretty good idea of what kind of story we're reading. Death is the core of his character arc. Dealing out death to others, dealing with the death of others, trying to prevent death to innocence, and coming to terms with his own eventual death. He accepts that death is inevitable, so he becomes a sorcerer who wants to save innocent people from the more gruesome deaths they'd experience if they became victims to curses, thus allowing them to have a more satisfying proper death, as he calls it. But I wonder, what really is the difference? At the end of the day, you still die. And I think that exact sentiment is what Gege has painstakingly tried to portray. Almost every death has this raw sense of pointlessness. Gege is telling us that there is no glory in death, that there is no proper death, that death is random and completely arbitrary. What one considers a proper death may be gruesome to another, and so in a twisted way, Gege turns a relatively simple character motivation into an idealistic impossibility. Yuji's desire to grant people proper deaths is something the story has consistently scorned with every single character death. But even so, it's not actually this idealistic impossibility. Character deaths, especially in Jujutsu Kaisen, are never actually pointless, and this is a generalization that can honestly be applied to every damn story. Even when they are made to feel pointless, there is always a point. So instead of just brushing it off as raw pointlessness, even if that may have been Gege's intended effect with his presentation, let's try to look at it beyond what it feels like. The way death is treated in JJK is very run-of-the-mill. Like, just happens, you know? It's commonplace. One day you're alive, the next day you're gone. There's no real point behind anything. That's how it feels on the surface, but despite that, every character death we've seen has had a very believable narrative impact, whether it be a lasting psychological effect on another character, or even just shedding light on a central idea the story is exploring. Proportional to their overall significance, to their power and influence over the narrative, the way death has been treated to me has never felt wasteful, with just one exception. It's always brought something of value to the story, even if it's cut short a journey that could have had more. And most importantly, in a lot of these cases, I don't think Gege really promised more from the characters who died. Kashimo is a prime example of what I'm talking about. Like pretty much every one of the past sorcerers, he is used for lore insights, for helping our protagonists grow, and for deepening our understanding of the enigmatic King of Curses. There's more to Kashimo, but I've never had a problem with his death because it's always made sense. He just watched Gojo get cooked. He couldn't even kill Hakari. Who the hell did he think he was? If he didn't get beaten that quickly, that would have been worse to me. A character who lives to fight, who is against the idea of interfering in someone's battle, who was written into the arc because of his desire to fight Sukuna, gets to fight him, puts up a decent performance, and then gets cooked because he's not really that guy. But in the process, he serves as a strong foil to Gojo, a model representative of how power rules above all in the world of JJK, and someone closer to Sukuna than most others, even if he's not all the way there. He brings a lot of value to the narrative despite meeting his end relatively quickly. I actually think it's pretty damn impressive how much Gege does for Kashimo with so little. People have every right to scrutinize each individual death and address their concerns on the micro, but a lot of the criticism I've seen is that characters don't get enough time to matter. And I think that perspective is pretty unfounded. How much should these characters matter, and why does death mean they suddenly stop mattering? Gege has proved time and time again that he can do wonders for characters long after their deaths. There's a reason why Toji is so popular. With that being said though, enough beating around the bush, and let's talk about the most infamous quote-unquote death in Jujutsu Kaisen. I'll be perfectly honest, and maybe this is just hindsight speaking, but I do think Nobara was always intended to be written out of the story in the climax of Shibuya. I think Gege knew what he was going to do with her character right from the very beginning, and I say this for a few reasons. Firstly, the main trio dynamic. Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara had a pretty unhealthy relationship with very poor communication between them, specifically between the boys, who would use Nobara as this kind of silent middle ground that would listen to their problems and let them vent to her about things they weren't comfortable telling each other. Between the talented Zenin prodigy and the boy with Sukuna existing in his soul, Nobara represents humanity and functions as a grounding factor to those around her. She brings a sense of calm and normalcy to a world of darkness. The reason she became a sorcerer was purely to escape her rural background, wanting to go live in the city, and in the process, she brought that rural background with her. In a story that I've previously described as a tragedy, Nobara is an exception. The greatest sadness she has ever felt was when a childhood friend moved away, and Gege made a point of showing us that this friend is living her life in the city as Nobara dies. In a way, her removal from the story marks the end of lightheartedness. From here on out, it's just gonna be pain and suffering. Nobara's demise is Yuji's breaking point, one we never really see him bounce back from. There's just one massive elephant in the room I have to address, and personally, it's my only issue with Nobara's quote-unquote death. Is she even dead? I think the way Gege has treated Nobara is genuinely just so bizarre. It feels so detached. I assume the intention is that Nobara's fate is an uncertainty not just for the reader, but for Yuji and Megumi also. They don't know if she's alive or dead, so neither do we. That's what I think Gege is going for, and to that effect, it has been pretty good for Yuji's character in the Culling games. It lines up with his cog mentality, how he has turned himself into a senseless soldier for the objective. That aspect of it is definitely effective, but still, I think we can all agree that Nobara definitely deserved better treatment. I would have zero problems with this if Gege simply committed one way or the other. There was enough wiggle room to have her death be confirmed or for her survival, but instead it's this baffling scene I've heard several different interpretations of and nothing since. Obviously Gege knows exactly what he's doing. You think the writer of what is currently Weekly Shonen Jump's hottest manga doesn't know he has completely shafted the main heroine, who was originally designed as a departure from typical shonen tropes? I didn't want to bring up that article, but it's very funny to think about. This entire scene with Hana is Gege rubbing it in our faces, rubbing it in Yuji's face, who still doesn't know what Nobara's fate is and hasn't even began to even try to come to terms with it. There's a lot of cool stuff to unpack and discuss with regards to Nobara that people unfortunately don't give the time of day to because of her uncertain status, which, like I said, it's definitely not good, but I do think the controversy is a little overbearing. It's not like Nobara had a lot of promise attached to her character that demands more from her, besides this tiny crumb Gege gave us before writing her out of the story, and that's just Gege being Gege. He just loves to build your hopes up right before crushing them. Nobara feels like a pretty complete character to me. The only issue is the ambiguity of her status. That said, this doesn't even come close to ruining Jujutsu Kaisen for me, but let's continue because there are other instances that are just as interesting to discuss. Before I speak about the most recent offender, the reason why I even felt like making this video, I want to go over some other characters who have been written out of the story in one way or another. The first is Yuki Tsukumo. I adore this character. I think she's very meticulously written and she gives you a lot to chew on. Lots of cool implications in her abilities, relationships, and general philosophy. I adore her battle against Kenjaku, but I must say, overall, I do feel unfulfilled. Again, I do think that's the intent, and I'm not using that as a defense for the writing, but it is noteworthy because I fully believe that's what Gege wants us to feel. It is very unfair how little time Yuki had to shine while alive, how she died fighting for someone she detested with every fiber of her being. I am certain we're going to get some post-mortem content, maybe flashbacks, whatever it is. Yuki's importance will continue to manifest in ways that will improve her character, but unfortunately, as it stands, she does leave a lot to be desired. My friend made a fantastic video on her character, and while working on it definitely made me appreciate her so much more. It also made me want more from her as well. The video is centered around how her post-mortem influence will manifest, so it's definitely softened the blow with my expectations, as we've already seen something she left behind be given importance, which affirms the contents of that video. I'll leave a link to that in the description for anybody who's interested. Yuki has definitely left her mark on the story, and her death doesn't feel wasteful to me so much as it does tragic and painful painfully characteristic of Jujutsu Kaisen. It has that raw sense of pointlessness on the surface that I mentioned, but there are embers of hope and value that can be found as well. I have zero problems with how Yuki died. I find it pretty Gege, for lack of a better description. I like when characters pull off 3000 IQ moves like Kenjaku did because it worked and I found it believable. Kenjaku has been around for 1,000 years. He's probably defeated tougher opponents with even dirtier tricks. My problem lies in the fact that there are so many interesting things with her that unfortunately haven't paid off yet. Who were her comrades? Besides maybe Laruto. There's a lot to Yuki that would have benefited greatly from her having another fight or another plotline of significance before Kenjaku took her life. Hopefully I can come back to this by the end of the story and eat my words, because Gege has proven that he can do a lot with characters through some kind of post-mortem influence on the narrative. Kashimo is another controversial one that I spoke about briefly earlier on. I have absolutely no problems with how he was treated. I understand the desire for more given how cool he is, but that's really the only thing he didn't deliver on. His power was nothing in the face of Sukuna, which should have been pretty obvious, I think. Everything else his character served to contribute to the story was well done. I feel like he's an unfair victim of high expectations. He's not as important of a character as many people thought he would be, and so when he was treated like a character of his stature, I thought that made perfect sense, and his final moments are by far his best. I never developed an emotional attachment to his character, and while some people would call that a problem, I don't think that's necessary for every character in a story. Some are purely functional and aren't written to be evocative, especially characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. There's nothing about Gege's character writing that doesn't interact with the framework of the story, even things that seem to be purely evocative. A good example of this would be the sorcerers playing baseball during the Goodwill arc. On the surface, it's a laid-back moment between school kids, one that's easy to attach to and find relatable. But the main point of this scene is to be used as an analogy for the sorcerer condition, a means for Gege to illustrate the philosophies of his characters, their weaknesses, and how they each interact with the greater framework of the story. People like Yuji and Gojo are always swinging for the fences, while Megumi is the type to sacrifice himself so his friends can advance. I don't think there's a single instance of character writing in Jujutsu Kaisen that doesn't adhere to the main framework, the Jujutsu system, agency, death, and curses. Gege Akutami writes his characters like he's moving chess pieces on a board. Characters aren't allowed to do things, to be, just for the sake of doing or being, and this was always the case. The reason that it feels way more pronounced now is that the characters who are getting focused don't allow themselves to be as expressive as Yuji was in Shibuya and prior, including himself now. They've all been hardened and tempered by the harsh experiences they've had, and it has made them colder. Every character without fail is a chess piece. All of them devote their existence towards the eventual checkmate, and like a chessboard, the highest number of pieces are the pawns, those that are considered necessary sacrifices on the path to victory. You can apply this to the mentality Todo presents to keep Yuji moving, the punishment every sorcerer must endure, to keep marching forward until you find out what you have been entrusted with by your fallen comrades. In essence, the ultimate checkmate. You can only know the path you have walked when looking back, and so to cope with the pain of walking this path, Yuji dehumanizes himself, turns himself into a senseless cog to make do with all the death and killing. He doesn't need a reason, he simply marches onward, praying that his actions will have some value to them in the distant future. In one of my recent videos, I spoke about Yuji's main character complex, how he employs narrative thinking to impart meaning to his actions as a coping mechanism for how futile living can feel. It's really interesting that Yuji is cognizant of his role as a cog in a system, which is what every single character is in Jujutsu Kaisen. They're all cogs. Even Sukuna and Kenjaku, they're just bigger cogs with more power than the others, which doesn't make them any less of a cog. The only character I think you can make a case for not being a cog is Maki, especially after the Zenin massacre, but that's a topic I plan to cover soon since Maki is one of my absolute favorites and she deserves her own video. Applying this cog metaphor to the story as a whole, with the framework of the story being a machine, every cog is a slave to the story, and once they die, the other cogs need to carry their load and push even harder to keep the machine functioning. There are other controversial deaths we could talk about, like Tsumiki, Yaga, even Nanami, surprisingly. I've seen a fair share of people who think Nanami was underdeveloped, but I feel like I'd say similar things for each of these individual cases, so instead, let me say this. Mahito was referred to as the mirror of humanity, and it is stated that this mirror manifests in death. This is why, when Mahito was standing before Nanami in the manga, Nanami saw Haibara. his biggest regret. Death is a gateway that humans linger beyond. Death is a mirror that makes humans analyze their lives, their choices, the path they paved for themselves and look back on in death. For Nobara, it's the people who pulled a chair and sat beside her, and she finally realized that it wasn't so bad. For Nanami, it's the next generation that he wishes didn't have to suffer like he did, and he recognizes that with death comes salvation from the endless suffering, and that Yuji will carry on in his stead. But then you have somebody like Tsumiki who was completely robbed of that opportunity. That's why I find her death so tragic. She didn't even have the chance to be an individual in the story. Her existence was rendered worthless by Kenjaku's summoning of Yorozu and of course Sukuna himself. Death is a mirror that shows you who you are. In chapter 161, Megumi said a very interesting thing, that the sorcerers in the olden days liked to fight to the death. They desired to be touched by death. What was once desired and maintained by the Golden Age sorcerers as the status quo of the Jujutsu world is what Kenjaku has revived through the culling games, but he has robbed everyone of the choice. Everyone is being touched by death whether they like it or not. With the obvious ways Kenjaku serves an author function in the story, being the one to have orchestrated various plots and schemes, this becomes especially interesting to think about. The assimilation of humanity with Tengen is a kind of death and rebirth, the step towards evolution. The way death is used in the narrative kind of feels like that too, like a gateway to understanding. Remember how Mahito tasting death gave him a better understanding of his own soul? Or how Gojo awakened reverse curse technique against Toji? The world of Jujutsu Kaisen is definitely do or die, but there's a secret third option for those who are blessed. The option to surpass your human limits and transcend. Finally, we arrive at the entire reason I felt like making this video. While I've tried to keep this analysis heavy and base my talking points firmly in material from the manga, this section of the video is going to be more free-flowing. Don't expect a clear-minded, fair assessment of things. I'm just talking about my personal thoughts, and I'm going to keep this short because there's honestly not that much to talk about. Alright, how should I start this off? I guess, what the hell are you doing, Gege? I know I just explained why anybody can get it and how Gege is very detached from his characters, treating them like pieces on the chessboard, la-di-da-di-da. But Kenjaku? This guy f***ing created chess. It's not just that his death isn't believable. Takaba's curse technique should not be slept on. It's kinda like the perfect way for Kenjaku to go out conceptually. I love a lot about that fight, besides like the jokes I couldn't understand because of the cultural barrier, and of course the ending. I know things are up in the air, and I'm holding firmly onto the belief that Kenjaku's role in the story isn't over. Call me a coper, I don't care, but this just feels wrong on so many levels. If this is the end of Kenjaku, that would be a complete departure from everything I like about how Gege writes death. Not just because of all the build up for Kenjaku to serve a massive role in the endgame, right? Cutting his story short like this would be pretty typical of Gege, as I've explained. What I find issue with is the nature of the scene. It just feels wildly inconsistent with the person he has been written to be, and Kenjaku doesn't seem like the type to lie about his motives, especially when nobody asked him for them. I'm talking about chapter 202, the first chapter I read on release after a long break I took following Shibuya in the manga. This was perhaps my favorite chapter in the series for a while, and the Kenjaku we see here is someone who will stop at nothing to see the merger with his own eyes. He is driven by insatiable curiosity, a genuine desire to see the next step of humanity as he perceives it. He doesn't want the merger for the merger's sake. It's not about this grand will that will be passed on to someone else. It's an entirely personal, selfish agenda. That is what made him so powerful, so effective, and why he commanded such an uncanny presence in every one of his scenes. His death is a complete departure from that, which is my biggest issue with Kenjaku dying here if he's actually dead. It's not how anticlimactic it was, because I was always expecting something like that for Kenjaku, and to a lesser extent, Sukuna as well. That's not the problem. The problem is, this does not feel like Kenjaku in the slightest, and you could argue that his character was so enigmatic and mysterious Gege can do whatever with him, but that just makes things sit even worse to me. Like I said, not much analysis here and more personal thoughts, but if this truly is the end of Kenjaku, I will be massively disappointed. That is a laughably sad way for a character of Kenjaku's caliber to be concluded. That being said, I think we've reached the end of the video. I've said everything I wanted to say, and at this point we just have to wait and see where things go. This is a bit different to my recent content, which were really focused analyses with an ultimate point, but I guess this does have a point too. Suffering is commonplace in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, and lately it has been suffocating. That's a good thing in my opinion, but when the one responsible for most of that suffering goes out like that, I don't know what to feel, and it's not good. I really like the story, but for a very long time, JJK has felt like it's been building up to something absolutely massive in weight and scale, something like the merger taking place. It has a lot riding on its climax, more so than most stories. It's not Attack on Titan levels of importance, but this final stretch of Jujutsu Kaisen is definitely make or break for the series. Is Gege racing to the finish line, or is he about to shake our world like he did with 212 and flip the entire story on its head once again? I really hope it's the latter and the best is coming, because on a chapter to chapter basis, there is no more enjoyable time to experience JJK than right now. Only problem is, when it's all said and done, what will we have left to take away from this story? Time will tell, and I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you very much for watching, and have an amazing day.